our webinar today, Best Practices for Managing SaaS Applications. I'm Frank Days, your host, and on behalf of everyone here at Correlsense, we'd like to welcome you to our webinar. Before we get started, I just wanted to take a moment to go through our agenda today and provide a little bit of housekeeping information. First of all, the presentation will focus a little bit on some basic facts and information and then the state of SaaS applications today. Then we'll go into the meat of the presentation, which is best practices. And then we'll do a slideshow and demonstration of our product. And then we'll end it with any questions and answers that you have along the way. A little bit of housekeeping to start with. We expect the presentation to last no more than 45 minutes. If you do have questions along the way, please do submit them via the chat window and go to webinar. We will periodically stop to try to answer questions that do come up. And finally, the slides will be available on correlsense.com, if not this afternoon, tomorrow morning. And finally, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Oren Elias, the CEO of Correlsense, who will take us through today's presentation.
Thanks, Frank, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. It's good to be able to speak on the 29th of February every 4 years. Kind of a few background facts about SaaS and SaaS adoption. The market is definitely growing very rapidly and very fast. The expectation is for overall market to reach about $40 billion by 2014. The numbers today are already pretty significant. And I think what's really significant is that we've moved from a state where SaaS was considered a low-cost alternative for mostly small and medium-sized businesses to solutions which cover the entire spectrum of organizations, starting from small-sized companies up to the very largest of enterprises. I'll use SalesForce in some of these examples. I think SalesForce.com really pioneered and proved the point that you can take your most sensitive data and move it into the cloud, and has now been adopted by enterprises almost across the board. A few interesting observations. In Q4 of 2011, Salesforce posted $600 million of revenue. I think what's even more interesting to note is that there were over $100 million deals within that quarter. And there were 9 deals over $10 million, and reportedly recently a 9-figure deal, which has also been done. Now this raises definitely the several questions around how do you support these applications, how do you implement these applications. These types of deals are clearly enterprise-sized deals. This is no longer just SaaS being a low-cost alternative that you can use your credit card instead of going through IT and an integration partner to propose a fully integrated project. The second example, which is also growing pretty rapidly within the enterprise market, is Google Apps. Google Apps now has over 40 million active users. A few interesting points just from the past 2 months. One is a company called Banco Bilbao Vizcaya, Argentina, a name that may not mean a lot for a lot of you out there. A Spanish financial services company with 110,000 employees just signed up with Google Apps in what has now become the largest enterprise deal ever for Google, and definitely for Google Apps. So this is definitely showing widespread adoption among the larger enterprises. The other interesting piece of news, specifically around Google Apps, happened in late December, where the LAPD decided to cancel cancel a deal that it has done with Google Apps a while back for 13,000 seats, a deal which was valued at $7.25 million. And the prime reason for canceling that agreement was security. So this ties into the topic of the presentation around the needs and the best practices of actually migrating off to a SaaS solution or a cloud-based solution, and the measures that need to be taken into consideration. The other interesting point to make around LAPD was that this is no longer just bypass IT altogether. LAPD deal has been done in conjunction with CSC, very large integrator, demonstrating how the larger projects definitely are now considered to be pure IT projects, where it started out originating as a way to bypass IT. IT is now very much engaged in a lot of these larger implementations. So SaaS is definitely easier, but it's not obviously always the easiest solution. So many things need to be taken into consideration. We'll cover this during this this webinar. One of the key points that we see is a question around IT's role in a SaaS implementation. We're heavy Google Apps users ourselves. We recently had some issues, and the first question that came up was, who do we call? Do we call internal IT? Do we call the vendor directly? Do we call our office manager? Who is really responsible for maintaining performance and availability of a SaaS application? How can we even measure SaaS applications? So this is a critical question which ties into the role of IT today, especially when you have a mix of on-premise applications, hosted applications, and in many cases now hybrid applications. SalesForce.com tying back into a back-end system which is on-premise. The line is not always clear who is actually the owner and who's actually the manager of the environment. So the big picture is not just about how to use SalesForce.com or SuccessFactors or any one of the larger or smaller SaaS vendors. It's looking at an overall picture which talks about not just requirements, but for example, what is the importance for data security? Are there additional plugins that are needed? Every one of the larger SaaS offerings usually has a marketplace. And the reason that that marketplace exists is to bridge the gaps and plug the holes within the offering. So all of this needs to be taken into consideration, and also the various addition, and also ties back into cost. If you need 4 completing solutions to complete the overall SaaS offering, that needs to be taken into consideration in cost as well. Change management is another critical point, especially since a lot of these platforms offer you the chance to extend the capabilities and extend the functionality using custom coding and custom development. So a few examples that we've compiled here of things to take into consideration moving into a SaaS-based implementation. A few examples, these companies are companies that we're familiar with. We have no direct tie to, but just to give an example, a company called Cloudlock can help bridge the gap around compliance within Google Apps. For some companies, this is a major requirement. For some companies, it's not directly relevant. But how do you track compliance with your documents up in the cloud? This is an example of a solution that you may or may not need to take into consideration moving into Google Docs based on your requirements for compliance. Another example is BI. We're heavy SalesForce.com users in Correlsense. And one of the main requirements was to have a very good BI tool. We started surveying and understanding that we'll need to complement our SalesForce implementation with a good BI tool. GoodData is a good example of one. There's several others on the App Exchange, but definitely something to be taken into consideration based on the requirements for reporting in case they're not adequate in what you have out of the box. Another example of a complementary solution to a lot of the larger SaaS offerings around security and identity management, ping identity. And a good example of a recent trend is integration of both SaaS companies together with on-premise, meaning that you have certain assets which are up in the cloud interfacing back to on-premise applications. And this creates a lot of new challenges around data integration, but also around the role of IT, who's responsible for managing the overall project, and how do you manage and track performance in such a hybrid environment. So one of the key elements that we found important and often neglected is how are you going to support the application? Just the simple answer to the question, who does the user call when they have an issue? Is the user supposed to open a ticket at salesforce.com, for example? Is the user supposed to contact Google directly, or is the user supposed to go to IT or a project manager? All of these answers are valid, but this needs to be set out from the get-go, and also defines what tools you'll be able to use in order to manage that SLA and to manage that level of performance. Surprisingly, this is an area that's been overlooked many times, and there are not a lot of good tools out there that are actually able to support these processes and help an internal IT organization or IT representative manage an externally hosted application. This is an example of a screenshot from one of our dashboards, actually measuring that we use internally to measure what kind of response times we're actually getting from our Salesforce.com implementation. Surprisingly, as I said, most of the tools out there today are focused on managing internal applications or applications that you've built yourself. But we were looking for a way for us to be able to tell what kind of response times we're actually getting from Salesforce.com. We want to be able to ask the question, if something is slow, is this because we're accessing it from a certain location? Is it our network? Is it all of our users, some of our users, all the time, some of the time? So this is a solution that we've put in place and are actually using internally to be able to measure for every single user, every single location, and every single type of activity, what kind of response times we're actually getting. You can see on the left side, we're measuring activities like viewing a lead, producing a report, searching for leads, or searching for accounts. The next point I wanted to make is around SLAs. SLAs have traditionally been measured by uptime. Still, you see a lot of the larger vendors offering SLAs which vaguely resemble uptime. And uptime's been measured according to how many nines you're able to get. Started with 99%, 99.99%. In reality, what we've experienced is that uptime means very little. Response times means a lot more than just uptime. We've seen a lot of examples and experienced it ourselves where the hosted solution was definitely up and running, but response times were shooting up to be 10 seconds, 15 seconds to get a response. in these situations, one would argue that 99.99% is really irrelevant. Some of the larger vendors have been moving into SLAs, which are more meaningful around performance degradation, and some do not offer SLAs at all. In case of larger vendors such as SalesForce.com, it really depends on size of deal. As we mentioned earlier, if you're signing 7, 8, 9-figure dollar deals, these tend to get negotiated with pretty strict SLAs. And the question is, how do you ensure that these SLAs really are met unless you have a good way to measure? This is an example of one of the Google Apps email outages that happened in 2009. There were several in 2010 and 11. And it kind of demonstrated, I think the recent one demonstrated how uptime really was meaningless. The service was definitely up and running, but everything took many seconds up to a minute to actually get a response. This hit the news pretty quickly. In a typical cynicism by TechCrunch, I think one of the posts actually said, we wanted to send you an email with the problems that we're having, but we just can't send them out because we're using Google Apps. So we decided to put it all over the wire and over the news. But response times are definitely much more important than just uptime and SLA. So this is another example of the types of data that you would want to obtain which move away from just uptime. So what kind of transaction volumes are we producing, and what's the response time that we're receiving for every different type of activity? Is it reasonable? What kind of locations, are all locations experiencing the same issues? This is the type of data that can actually help answer some of the questions that a first-level support person would actually need to answer when getting your complaint from one of the customers. The first thing that we're trying to figure out is this happening to everyone? Can this probably be or possibly be a network issue, or perhaps even a problem with one of the desktops before we go over and escalate it to the hosted provider? When we do escalate to the hosted provider, we have to have some form of proof that the issue is definitely not on our side, it's definitely happening, and needs to be taken care of. Having historical data over a long period of time and being able to retain that data is definitely key to prove repeated outages. In many cases, when you do have SLAs in place, this can also be used to gain some financial reimbursement for loss of revenue or loss of use of the platform that you're actually paying for. One of the most challenging environments that we've seen is cases of hybrid environments. Either hybrid environments that tie a SaaS offering integrated back to systems behind the firewall, but just even if the SaaS offering is not integrated, being able to see in a single dashboard and manage the same way both applications that are on-premise and applications that are used hosted or SaaS applications really becomes a key. Ideally, we'd want to have one tool to report on performance, one tool and dashboard to be able to alert on performance, and not have to aggregate a lot of different sources of information to figure out how all the applications are being used. The best practice today is pretty much to rely on application management tools for on-premise applications and some form of reporting produced by the hosted vendor itself to figure out what the performance really was. But again, this is relying on the very same entity that's supposed to provide the service to be able to measure and report correctly. So I want to take the next few minutes to walk through some of the capabilities that we can offer in terms of monitoring and implementation. This is an example from what we've actually been using internally to monitor our own SalesForce.com usage. So the first is managing the end user experience. What kind of response times we're getting. What we see here is for every application, and this can have multiple applications. It can have Salesforce, SuccessFactors, Ancestry.com, small and large ones like Google Apps, ranging down to very small ones, showing what's the overall average response time, how much activity is actually going on, and what is the current SLA that we've agreed with our internal users. For each application, and this is mostly for the project owner or the application owner within our company, we have a separate dashboard. So we can see very clearly what are the active locations that we have. If we have multiple offices, are they getting the same type of response times? Maybe it's a network latency. And understand how the various types of activities actually perform. This is increasingly important when we look at custom developed modules, because these may be reasons which are not exactly clear if they're within the range of responsibility of the company that wrote the entire module, or within the range of responsibility for the hosted platform support. So knowing that something is slow is not enough, we want to be able to understand what exactly is running slow. Is it just that leads are running slow, viewing a lead, perhaps it's editing a lead? Users, when they call up, they usually say everything crashed or the entire system is down. The first step is to actually understand which types of activities are not performing as they should, and what does it actually mean when they say everything is down. I just talked to a sales leader in another company a few weeks ago, and his main concern was that they were making a lot of changes into Salesforce. Things were running slow, but they couldn't figure out if this was part of the platform's issue or they just included too many different tabs, and that's really what's slowing them down. So being able to tell exactly which part is working fine and which parts aren't is critical to be able to support external applications. So in this example, you can see how we know if it's a lead report, a certain report, charts, viewing the leads, editing a lead, and for each one of these we have a separate SLA set. So we may be able to say viewing the lead has to happen under 1 second for 80% of the cases, but viewing a list of 20 or 25 leads may take a bit longer. Comparing performance over time is a critical element in terms of change management. In the past, most of the SaaS platforms have offered a set solution with very limited configuration and customization options. Today, platforms like Force.com and the App Exchange, Google App Engine as a development platform, and many, many others offer a chance to actually develop custom modules. That develops a lot of new challenges around change management. And one of the aspects needed for that change management to be effective is to be able to see before and after. So taking a performance snapshot before a change and after a change will help answer questions like I mentioned earlier, which say, is this the platform's fault? And if I'm using plain vanilla, if I put in 15 changes, did performance degrade or improve because of these changes? And having that in a very timely manner is helpful both to communicate back to the users, but also to be able to do performance testing to some extent to understand if we're improving or degrading over time. Different geographies is definitely critical. I've personally experienced a wide range of different user experience and user response times when accessing some of the platforms from overseas and from the US. In some cases, there are several data centers that are provided by the hosting provider, by the SaaS provider. Not all of them receive the same performance, and in some cases, it's just due to network latency. So being able to compare between many different locations, whether it's office branches or even users which are roaming around, is key to be able to understand how what kind of response times we're getting and probable root cause for the degradation. And last but not least is automated reports. Dashboards are nice. People usually use the dashboards and analytics when there's an issue. But being able to receive push reports weekly or daily on key performance indicators is something with great value. And again, the ability to get a single pane of glass that shows both on-premise applications and hosted applications is something which is definitely key to be able to get that on a daily or weekly basis, both to communicate with users and also with support of the hosted provider as well. So to summarize, SaaS is often a good solution. When going into a major SaaS project, a lot of things need to be considered. And planning, as in everything, is always key. But understanding the SLA and the application performance is often overlooked and can become a major reason for adoption or sticking point for adoption when actually rolling out the SaaS project in itself.
Great. Thank you, Oren. What I'd like to do right now is just open the floor for questions to see what questions people have. I'm going to pause for just a moment. Well, it looks like we don't have any questions at the moment. So on behalf of everyone on the Correlsense team, Oren, thank you for a great presentation today. Again, if you have questions, feel free to email us at correlsense.com. The best way to take a look at your applications online is to download a free copy of our SharePath Run product. The SharePath for SaaS applications product is a slightly different one, so you can email us to get more information on that. You can also see a demo of SharePath in use at correlsense.com/demo. Once again, on behalf of the Correlsense team, thank you for joining us today and have a wonderful day.